Well, we have overcome all sort of technical challenges this morning, but we have persevered. We've stuck through it, and we've got phones routed through computers, routed through headsets, routed to mixing boards, and I think we're going to be able to capture this conversation for you guys today. And it's absolutely one of those conversations that is worth overcoming any obstacle for. This is worth all the trouble. This is one I did not want to abandon or reschedule because this is so important. Joe Imperatrice, did I get that right?
Sure you did.
Pretty close. Joe Imperatrice. Joe is Blue Lives Matter NYC. And we're talking today about the role of law enforcement, the relationship between law enforcement and communities, and we're going to get into all kinds of great stuff. But Joe, first of all, brother, just welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast, and we just want to hear your story. Share your story with us about how you got to where you are today.
First of all, I want to thank you. It's been weeks in the making, and then when the morning comes, there's more obstacles, which, like you said, we overcame. So it means a lot for me to be able to have a great conversation with you. Coming up to my 20th year in the New York City Police Department, it's kind of crazy saying that. Kind of makes me realize how old I'm getting. I started in 2006. My dad was a police officer. He's a big reason why. On top of seeing the 9/11 towers be hit and terrorist attacks from Staten Island, that's another reason why I wanted to become a cop. Fast forward to, 2014, after having some experience on, and there's nothing but negativity in the newspapers, right? Mostly attacking police officers, making them villains all across the nation. And then we had the assassinations of Detectives Lou and Ramos that were just sitting in their patrol car, went to work thinking they're going to get a paycheck 5 days before Christmas, and they're killed by a man that came from Baltimore. And before that, he put on social media that he wanted to have pigs fly. And that's what he did. He killed two great men and left a lot of questions. So when you go to the wake and funeral service of Rafael Ramos, which was before Wendy and Lou, it's freezing. It's December, and you see police officers in their patches from all over. And you say, how do we just let this go after all the cops have been villainized and killed and hurt and media reports? And we came up with the simple idea of just silicone wristbands, and that's how we started. And here we are 10 years later, raising over $4 million, not one person on salary, a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization. I've become a voice for law enforcement, going on all the major networks, being able to just spread positivity, but also give an insight from an active officer that hasn't been retired in 20 or 30 years that can relate to what is going on.
Yeah, so that was 2014, and that's kind of what pushed you and inspired you to start this this organization. Just for my clarification, as I was looking at your website, there's Blue Lives Matter NYC. Is that part of a larger national Blue Lives Matter?
So we're the only registered nonprofit Blue Lives Matter anything. There's websites and like that, but we have a couple chapters. One in LA, we had one in Florida, we had a fitness chapter, we have a canine chapter with an active first grade detective. So we do have several, but it's almost like let's say Derek Jeter, because I'm from New York. There's only one Derek Jeter. So if Derek Jeter goes to another state and makes an appearance, for instance, it's very special because there's one of him. When we get asked to go all across the nation to help, it's very special for people to see individuals still showing an act of kindness, still being able to go and give up their time. So I'd rather, honestly, with less headaches, have the one and just do as much good as we can. Gotcha.
So you started your law enforcement career, you said 06?
Yes, sir.
06. So tell us, what have you seen since 06, from 06 to now, over these 19, 20 years or so, the sentiment, if you will, the relationship between law enforcement officers and citizens, communities. What's the change looked like there?
Well, I think there's been a lot of outreach, a lot more than when I first started, right? I think it's been better, the relationship-wise, but the problem is the accountability coming from the justice system, right? There's a lot of great people out there. There's more great people than bad people. And they want great, proper, respectful policing, but they want policing at the end of the day. And when there's judges and politicians fighting every single day for personal interest, letting bad people back onto the streets to kind of deteriorate, not kind of, but to deteriorate their neighborhoods, the community gets frustrated because they want to see change. They want to see graffiti cleaned up. They want to see drug addicts, off the streets and get help. They want to see the people that are robbing and mugging and burglarizing, not roaming the streets. They want to see people that are shooting up on the street corners or in between streetcars or homeless on the sidewalks. They want to see them have help and removed. But it's been very, very difficult because politicians pit police officers against the public every chance they get. And that's been the hardest.
How do they do that? How do politicians pit law enforcement against communities?
Fake narratives. I think one of the best things, and at first there was a lot of pushback in law enforcement with body cameras, right? But body cameras save so many cops. There's no more he said, she said. This is what happened. As long as the body camera showed it, there's no other story, right? And the problem is with a lot of activists and certain politicians, when they started noticing that the body cam footage actually blew up in their face, they'd start another narrative. They'll take a 10-second clip of something that looks terrible, but they won't show the 2 or 3 minutes leading up to it. And a lot of people that watch TV or on social media are very gullible. And that's been an issue.
Can you give an example, I'm wondering, of one of these false narratives that you've seen pushed forward or purported by a politician that hurt the relationship between law enforcement and community?
Danny Pantaleo and Eric Gardner, the one where the I can't breathe and that whole situation that went nationwide, right? There's a lot of false information or retracted information. They also didn't show the 10 or 15 or 20 minutes of the officers showing up respectfully, requesting that the individual just come with them. They didn't put up how the chief of department at the time called up the precinct and made a big deal saying, hey, this person's selling loose cigarettes. We need your officers to go over there. The media made it seem like you had 2 white officers that just showed up on a street corner to harass a black male, which was not true. They left out the career criminal he was, the multiple complaints, which, as we just stated, that came from the community. The store owner that said, hey, we're selling legitimate cigarettes. There's an individual showing up selling loosies every day, taking away from our business, harassing our customers. The politicians and the media do not tell the full facts. They do whatever's going to sell papers, and I don't like that. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter political party, color of your skin, sexual orientation, religion. We're all human beings. Let's all be honest. Let's come to a solution, and let's work towards it.
So you mentioned the I can't breathe part was part of a false narrative, right?
No.
Okay. That reminds me of, there's a lot of other things like that I've read. Granted, I don't know the inside story like you do. I'm not in law enforcement, but like that reminds me of the Ferguson one, hands up, don't shoot. And we saw like that becoming like a big thing. And then when it was when it went to trial, we learned in court that actually that had never been said. And so that to me was like an example of something that became this slogan, became this rally cry against law enforcement that actually was never even said.
And that was with Michael Brown.
Yeah.
And the media tried their best to leave out that individual. They put up his picture of being an angel like they normally do. And meanwhile, he just went in and robbed the store owner right in the store. And he beat the hell out of a cop who used every restraint he could. And unfortunately, and I would never want to be in that situation, that officer felt like that was the only option he had. This was a big boy that was pounding on him. And something terrible happened. But once again, you had sports athletes and you had to catch fire and everyone's all over the place, saying how terrible and racist police officers are. But if the narrative, as in the real story, came out from the beginning, we wouldn't see communities being burned to the ground. We wouldn't see innocent people being beat up. We wouldn't see rallies where they're shutting down streets. This is the frustrating part that's gotten worse over my last 20 years.
Yeah, you mentioned he was a big boy, and that's a huge point because I remember when this came out, when it first was on the news, first on headlines, and it said teenager. It said police kill teenager. Policeman kills teenager. And I've noticed that that's a very misleading term because you become a legal adult at 18. You're legally an adult. And honestly, I believe men become men, no longer boys, even earlier than that, right? I would say that boys cross into manhood somewhere closer to probably 15. You're not a boy anymore, certainly by 16. So when we see just a headline that says teenager, and then you click on the article and it's like, some massive 19-year-old linebacker, right? You're like, okay, I don't know if I would, necessarily say teenager at that point. They're obviously swaying it, right?
Yeah, there comes a point that, listen, any tragedy, anyone that loses their life is a tragedy, whether it's intentional, whether it's by accident, whatever the case is. But we need to get to the forefront of stop allowing certain people to lie and hold them accountable when they do, in hopes that it deters it going forward. There's many, many incidents that can be diverted. Police officers have the hardest job in the world. No one's calling 911 when it's a 95-degree sunny day and there's unicorns and rainbows prancing around your neighborhood. It's because they feel like they have no other resort. It's the last resort. Even bad guys call cops when they need help. That says a lot. And we need to give cops the benefit of the doubt. And if an officer does anything wrong, especially criminal, they have no business wearing that uniform. I am wholeheartedly in agreement with that. But if an officer genuinely does their job that they were trained to do, no matter how bad the situation is, we need to understand that we put that officer there. We expected them to do that job. We can't turn on them because we don't like the narrative. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's some really good points. All right, so let's move now to 2020. To me, this is like when everything in the country just hit the fan, and this was when COVID, where everybody's wearing masks in grocery stores, and you've got George Floyd. So to me, the George Floyd one was kind of the biggie, but now I'm learning that you were already creating this organization well before that, from the 2014 murders. Talk to us a little bit about the law enforcement perspective, your perspective on the George Floyd death.
Well, I was in uniform. I was getting sent out in Manhattan to Soho when people were going and smashing windows and grabbing products and running out of storefronts. It was complete insanity. They literally looked at it as something like I Am Legend. They were boarded up stores. There was spray paint on the panels. It was disgusting thinking that in a society in 2020, this is the world we live in. Optics, right? Those officers, did it look terrible? 1,000%. Do I think Derek Chauvin should have gotten off that individual, put him to his side, sat him up? Yeah, absolutely. But once again, the media and the politicians came right out and said black versus blue, right off the bat. They didn't say that this individual was a career criminal, a violent criminal, right? Even if you want to say that doesn't mean anything for that personal situation. One step further, he went into a store and committed a felony. It was forgery. He gave over a fake, I believe it was $20 bill or whatever bill it was. Yeah. And somebody in that store called the 911. The officers were called. They did not just show up to harass a certain individual that day. Another step further, what I don't like, media and politicians, they don't allow the toxicology reports to be entered into evidence of, was that a contributing factor of an individual losing their life? They leave that big information out. Once again, optically, in New York City, one of the things you're taught as an officer, get somebody right up, put them on their side, sit them up. They didn't show the video completely of the officers trying to put, George Floyd in the back of a vehicle. He refused to go in. gave him a hard time. That's why he ended up on the floor to begin with. Not because they threw him down, not because they were being inhumane. There's all snippets of what was seen that was not given to the public.
Yeah.
And if that was just stopped on day one and shown what happened under the influence, the crime that was committed, it would have been quieted down, right? Because the truth was given. Could they have disciplined, fired, brought charges against Derek? 1,000%. But then, you know how slimy it is in their handbook for that particular police department. I do not agree with it, but that was a tactic that these officers were shown to do, is kneel on the back of a certain, on an individual. I didn't create it. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that was there. How does it automatically disappear and go against an officer when they were told to do that? Once again, optically, completely wrong. Looked absolutely inhumane. There's no justification. But give the facts to the American people.
Yeah.
Don't rile people up. How many communities were burned to the ground? Police precincts taken over. People living on the streets. This is just like Occupy Wall Street. When things like this happen, the overwhelming majority of people that hit the streets are mentally ill, that aren't part of a group, that don't feel welcome, that give their family a hard time, that aren't taking their medicine. Not all, but a lot of them. And this is what it creates. It creates havoc in the street, almost like watching the movie Joker.
Yeah, man, that's so true. It is. It does seem like watching that movie. And another one that I've just kind of recently been reading everything about the the Derek Chauvin court case, and I've learned a ton from reading about that. Like, for example, George Floyd was saying, "I can't breathe," while still in the police car. Like, before he got out, before he was on the ground, before that whole incident, he was already having trouble breathing from the fentanyl in his system. But like in 2020, like nobody was hearing that. No, that wasn't anywhere, right? It was just, I remember like basketball players wearing shirts that said, "I can't breathe." Like, it was the narrative being pushed, was the "I can't breathe." And we were all being led to believe that like he was saying that because of the actions of the police, when actually he was saying that way before because of the drugs in his system.
And this is the problem. The narrative that goes out there that they force against the public, which a lot of people are misinformed, that they don't have the evidence in front of them. It's wrong. If the American people had the proper information from the get-go, from the start, from the jump, we would see a lot less issues. But it's so easy to always attack police officers. It's so easy to have people turn on police because what do police officers do? They take away someone's freedom, right? That's the last thing anyone wants. They have the ability to go out there and really ruin your day, even if you're completely wrong. It's a big task. It's a big undertaking. But we need more transparency, and not just with the police, but in general, working together. And police officers, especially from the top, the captains, the chiefs, the civilian members, they need to be given the authority to go out there and be able to give the public that information, to not be told to withhold it for whatever reason that they're going to do. If something happens, be honest, transparent, and put out the fire when it's small, not when it gets out of control.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned how media is trying to pit it as black versus blue, right? And so let's talk about race and the relationship there between Blue Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter. 2020, that's when I think everybody in America heard about Black Lives Matter. That it was everywhere. People are wearing. I remember I was going to the hospital a lot. My daughter was getting an organ transplant in 2020. So we were in the hospital like constantly as this was happening. Of course, hospitals are downtown hospitals are teeming with law enforcement. So I was like walking through and around the midst of law enforcement, like almost every day around this time, seeing the graffiti, seeing the, doctors and nurses wearing Black Lives Matter pins and buttons in the hospital with all the police officers walking around. It was just a crazy time, a lot of tension in the air. I think a lot of people see Blue Lives Matter, the organization, as like a response, as like an answer or rebuttal to Black Lives Matter organization. Is that the case, or tell us your view on that?
Now, once again, I got to thank the media, because we started to be able to help the families of cops killed in the line of duty or diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. It was never about to be on TV. It was never about to, be a spokesman. I would have never been here this morning with you if it wasn't for the media making it the black versus the blue. The facts are facts. Since decades before, right? Black Lives Matter, right? They want to say that. Black lives only matter when they can put a spin on it, when there's dollar signs involved, unfortunately. There's so many neighborhoods where there's black on black crime, but for whatever reason, nobody wants to talk about that. The poor men, which most of the time they get sucked up into the gangs and, caught up in nonsense or hit by a stray bullet, that can have a bright future ahead of them. Why aren't these organizations going into the communities to make their lives better, to teach them the positivity? They don't do that. They wait for a payday and the greatest media story to come out to be able to start talking things. So I think when they first started, they may have meant to have good intentions. Yes, there's a very good possibility. But whoever ended up hijacking that conversation brought it to what it is today. How many of these big $1 million, billion-dollar corporations bended a knee to throw money at them so that they didn't have to see their name smeared as a racist? That's wrong. We hear it. God forbid Joe Imperatrice took the money that was given by taxpaying dollars, right? That donations. And I went and bought $1 million home somewhere. I'd be sent up the river in a solitary confinement pen, never to be seen again. But yet there's top people in that organization who went out and bought $1 million homes. And what happened? It was a media hit for one day and the person's out roaming. It's complete nonsense. If we're going to help a certain type of person or any person in general, let's do it for the right reasons. Let's not do it for, once again, a media story. And that's what this has become.
Hey, men. Thrivent is proud to support Men's Alliance's goals, and financial advisor Dr. Andrew Newman, call sign Sage, is excited to help tribe members and those they care about make financial choices guided by their Christian values. Faith is what fuels Andrew. Does it fuel you too? Call Andrew today at 612-246-0725 so you can take care of yourself and those you care about, including your local tribe and Men's Alliance. Yeah, man, you just dropped a lot of great info there. I want to go back and pull it a little bit, unpacking the black on black crime part that you mentioned. How much of a problem is that, or like what percentage of black deaths do you happen to know is from more of that situation?
For the overwhelming majority of every city in the United States, I would say it's probably the overwhelming majority of the crimes that happen. Not all. I'm not going to say that, right? Because everybody or anybody or any nationality can commit a crime. But the overwhelming majority of crime tends to happen by African Americans. Why? We can debate it. We can say why. At the end of the day, those are the numbers. That's not Joe Imperatrice being a racist. That's not Joe Imperatrice coming out and just making up something.
Right.
That is the truth. And for some reason, even in 2025, people are afraid to get up there and speak what is happening.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. It's always frustrated me. It's not pointing the finger just to make yourself look better. This is the problem. Once again, how do we fix it? But it's almost like the system, the people in charge don't want to fix it, and that's a problem.
Yeah. So what you're saying here is a really interesting point that I'm thinking a lot of people have never asked themselves, and that is this: why don't we hear BLM speaking out against black on black murders? Why is there silence when that's a terrible thing? That's a tragedy, and that's what's killing more black people than the situations where a white police officer kills a black person. I know those are very rare. Actually, I've read the statistics that white men being killed by police officers is a far more common thing than black people being killed by police officers. But again, we don't really hear that, and we don't see BLM speaking out against any crime unless it's committed by a white guy against a black person.
BLM would probably be the most successful nonprofit organization in the world if they went into the communities of color where they need it most, where it's high crime, and they were able to turn those communities around. They were able to have success stories of helping people, getting them out of gangs, having drives where illegal firearms are just given in, with no names, no information. Being able to help young men and young women be able to find jobs, volunteer work.
Where's all that?
They would be the most successful nonprofit organization in the world if they did it from the heart. The problem is it obviously shows that they're not doing it for the right intentions.
Yeah, no, you're right there, and that the whole situation with the multi-million-dollar mansion being purchased, by one of the directors of BLM just kind of was just so absurd, right?
If that was me or one of my board members, I would have been locked up, the key would have been thrown away, and I would have been on every headline in the world about how terrible of a person I was and how slimy police officers are. But where is the double standard? Where do we draw the line and say, these are the facts? It's almost like they continue to skate. I do not know why. I do not know how. But that is a big frustrating point. It doesn't matter what part of the world you come from. If you mess up, you should be held accountable.
Yeah, for sure. Tell us a little bit about, you're talking about going into these communities and helping people. Tell us, what is Blue Lives Matter doing for police officers and their families? Tell us some of the work you guys are doing there on the front lines.
Like I said, off of starting with 3 police officers in New York City, we've raised over $4 million. We all have full-time jobs. We have volunteers that are civilians. The most recent endeavor we had, I'll say 2 of them, is a new hire police officer was in the academy. He's driving to work. He's not feeling good. He gets to the police academy. They rush him to the hospital. He's 31 years old. He has stage 4 colon cancer. So we did a fundraiser, right? Boots on the ground, t-shirt fundraiser, raised approximately $6,500, which hopefully in the next couple of weeks we're able to give to him. Does it take away his cancer? No. Does it help him with a little bit of his bills? Yes. But it lets him know that the officers he works with that he doesn't even know are willing to help him. Detective Islam, with the tragedy we just had in Midtown Manhattan, set up, once again, it's one of our signatures, the t-shirt fundraiser. We're raising thousands of dollars to be able to give to the family. During COVID, we supported local businesses by being able to use funds to be able to feed our cops all throughout the city. We've done things like that. I've teamed up with Chaz Palminteri, the actor, most notably Sonny from the Bronx Tale, great friend of mine. We donate and meet up and surprise several officers throughout the year, battling breast cancer, families that have lost a loved one in the line of duty, lost a loved one due to cancer or 9/11 related illness. I go to him. Joe Piscopo has become a great supporter of ours. Several people from the Fox family. Grant Stinchfield used to be with Newsmax. I've teamed up with so many people to be able to go out there and put a smile on these cops' faces. Because think about it. Other than the military, I say it all the time. There's many dangerous jobs. But in this day and age, right, you walk out your front door, you say goodbye to your family, and there's a real chance that some nut out there has a target on your back and you will not make it home. Detective Islam has 2 young boys, one on the way, one child on the way. Yeah, Detective Diller had a child that was 8 months old at the time. His dad will never be able to have a baseball catch with his son ever again. We have a huge gala once a year where people literally from all over the world, as far as Australia, come. And we honor our families, not just from last year or the year before, but going back 20, 30, 40 years, letting them know that their loved one's sacrifice will never be forgotten. Because that's what these families want to know. With all these protests and the nonsense, and they're watching Fox News, and you hear these disrespectful, and that's a nice way of putting it, people chanting, kill the pigs, fry them like bacon. Your loved one got shot in the head putting on a uniform trying to take a drug dealer off the street, and this is what you have to hear. You have to see people getting in police officers' faces and screaming and saying, thank God, that cop got killed. It questions and saying, was this worth it? For my husband or my daughter or my wife to lose their life. So for them to know that their loved one's sacrifice meant something and it's appreciated by the overwhelming majority of people in this world, it keeps them going. And that's the most important mission that we have.
Man. Yeah, I can't imagine what it must be like to try to be a law enforcement officer right now, especially one in one of these in a large city where there's so much anti-police rhetoric and protest going on. Is there a problem with law enforcement recruiting right now, or does anybody still want to be a cop?
There's a couple different avenues we have here, because over the years we've seen also is people have wanted to come to us. Number one, your life is priceless, right? A cop is never going to make $1 million a year. It ain't happening, right? But yet you have a basketball player or a baseball player hitting the ball, and you do have to be talented. but there's no threat there. There's no threat that you're going to lose your life under a normal circumstance, right? So no matter how much they throw at you, it's never going to be worth it. You have to do it because it's a calling. As corny as it sounds, you have to want to make a difference. Maybe something growing up, he said, I didn't like the way that happened. I don't like police, whatever the case may be, right? That's number one. So the pay. But honestly, in New York City nowadays, you can make a decent living. Things are pricey here, but you can. One thing I don't like from day one is lowering the standards. We cannot lower the standards of the people that we expect to save us, but yet we're going to put somebody in there that isn't intelligent enough, can't make a decision on their own. Because I say it all the time, you're giving a badge, a gun, and a uniform and told to either save a life or take the life in a matter of seconds. There is no greater responsibility in the world that God himself can give you. Save a life or take a life. And we need to make sure the individuals that we're having and we're recruiting are up for that task. Physically fit, mentally fit, willing to understand, have compassion. You know, we need diversity, which we also have, for people to understand maybe certain communities that we didn't grow up in. But it's a well-rounded pie chart, which we need to sit down back at the table and say, how do we get back to the basics and how do we make this profession the best it's ever been?
Yeah. I've seen, you know, where like, in the news, some towns where like, I think I saw one where like an entire police department, quit. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's happened in several different parts. And this is what happens when your elected officials and your executives bend the knee to things that are not righteous, that they want police officers to step back. Your job is to go out there and make arrests. It has happened in the past where executives have told police officers around this nation, do not go out there and enforce the law. That is wrong. You know, and it all comes down to the media and the politics of the job. There should be no politics in policing. There shouldn't be no politics when it comes to electing a sheriff or a judge. You know, I'm totally against the Democrat and Republican portion coming into anything like that. Judges especially are supposed to enact the law as written, not because their beliefs in a political party. And that's another thing we got to get back to as well, is doing things for the right reasons. And is it worth you risking your life being a political puppet, knowing that you cannot do your job to the best of your ability? A lot of people will say no, and that's why we see people walking off the job.
Men's Alliance, we've been pro law enforcement since day one. When I was about the same time I was kind of starting Men's Alliance, and I was doing mental health counseling with Christian Counseling Associates at the time. We started doing an annual law enforcement appreciation dinner, and this was I think we started it in 2020. I think that was probably the first one, because we felt like this need within the community, right? We were like, man, there's just so much negativity going on towards law enforcement. We wanted to do something to encourage them. So we created this law enforcement appreciation dinner night. So I started, I reached out to some police friends of mine, talking to them about, here's what we want to do. Help us out. We reached out to, you know, the chief of police, the sheriff, and tell them about this. And I got hit real quick with the reality that I had never considered, right? They were like, you can't advertise this event, right? It's like, I'm wanting to help do something good and put on this good event. And it was going to be, you know, just like a totally free for all law enforcement at any level, and bring a date, bring your spouse, all free, put on this big event. So we want to get as many people there as possible. And they were like, listen, that's a great idea, but it's going to have to be entirely word of mouth, because if you advertise this, one, no cop is going to come to it if it's advertised, because we're going to see it as walking into a place that's potentially dangerous, where people we don't want coming are going to be there protesting. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had never thought about that. That had not occurred to me. And so just starting to realize the hurdles we're going to be up against trying to do something pro law enforcement. And since then, we've grown. We've got lots of cops in MA, right? And we did an awesome podcast with Breacher. I can't remember the episode number that was, We have Breacher in here talking about some of the challenges he faces, as a cop. And then this is where it got crazy for me, and the relationship between doing Christian men's ministry and our relationship with law enforcement. And this is what led me to really want to have you on the podcast. Was I had a conversation with another men's ministry leader, a different Christian men's ministry, and we were talking about promoting each other's ministries. And I said, "Hey, man, we're doing this law enforcement appreciation dinner. It's going to be awesome. All your guys are invited. Will you tell your guys about it?" He goes, "Oh, Dave, I can't do that, man." And I'm shocked. I'm like, at this point, I'm so naive. I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you can't? And he goes, "I have a lot of black men in my ministry." And I'm like, man, I was so dumbfounded by that, right? I was like, yes, so do we. What does that have to do with anything? I said, and probably half the cops that come to the appreciation dinner are going to be black. I was like, what does that have to do with anything? And he was, it was like this divide. And this is what I learned that day. I learned that there were some Christian ministries that were BLM. I learned there were Christian ministries that were on the BLM side, and then there were going to be Christian ministries like ours on the Blue Lives Matter side. And it's unfortunate that line was ever even created, because as Christians, as a Christian men's ministry, we are 100% pro law enforcement, and absolutely for people of all color as well. Like that's such a given. We don't even need to say that. That's absolutely true. But realizing that was when I began to realize that there's people in ministry that are afraid to take a stand for cops. They're afraid to speak out and be pro law enforcement because they're afraid of racial repercussions from this. Right. And so you were talking about how everybody was, forking over some money, bending the knee, wearing the badge. And I think it's because there's such an incredible fear in America of being labeled a racist.
Yeah.
It's like the worst thing you could possibly ever be called in the United States is a racist. And people are trying so hard out of fear to not be labeled that they'll go to extreme absurd, links of like bowing and, and supporting, BLM, which is a communist founded organization where the leader is swindling money from, obviously, but we would rather support that. We would rather support that than get labeled as racist. And this was my realization of what is going on. We as Men's Alliance, as a Christian men's organization, we've got to speak up, and we've got to be pro law enforcement. We've got to be the Blue Lives Matter aligned ministry. That was my wake up moment.
Well, you would think, because people, once again, make it wherever they want it to be. You would think that being the founder of Blue Lives, I'm this rah-rah, screaming, yelling, chanting. I'm the complete opposite. I'm very level-headed. I'm here to figure out how do we make people's lives better. That's what everyone should be doing. It's hard, and I don't want to say I'm happy that you saw that side of it, but this is the reality that cops have to deal with. They stopped wearing police officer shirts to go out and work. They stopped, they took the blue line flags off the front of their homes. They took the blue line stickers off the stuff. This is a profession you should be proud of. People don't understand. When I walk around at work, I think I'm one of the most luckiest people in the world being accepted to the greatest police department in the world. The NYPD has allowed me to meet people from literally all over the world I call it the all-star team of the United States, because if it wasn't for me becoming an NYPD officer, I wouldn't have learned about different cultures or, seen people that I normally wouldn't have been able to come across who become my best friends. They're not even best friends. These are people you lean on to be able to make sure that you go home safe at the end of the day. Black officers, Hispanic officers, Asian officers, Eastern Pacific, whatever you want to say. No officer thinks the way that the public perceives things. Not even the public, but once again, it goes back to the problem, the media. These cops look at it. I've had, officers of color look at what's going on in the media and they laugh because it's not true. They want to put a false narrative out there to make you believe that this is what's happening. I've met the greatest people. Yes, in some professions, you have knuckleheads, you have people with egos, or someone has a short temper. Of course. It's like there's no difference.
In every job.
But in every single job. It could be digging ditches. It could be going to the supermarket. There's always one. But they're great people. And no one ever wants to get to know the great people behind the uniform. And almost every single cop that's targeted isn't because it was Joe Imperatrice, the father, the person that lives here. It was Joe Imperatrice, the person that wore the uniform. That's what people don't see. So someone loses their life off of a narrative or an agenda, right? But they had a whole life ahead of them, all because they stood for something. When a 911 call comes over, never once in my 20 years have I heard a cop on the other end say, what is the nationality? What is the sexual orientation? Are they male or female? No. They say, where are they? What's the direction of flight? What's the location? Are they injured? They want to help. That is the truth. That's the God's honest truth, and it will always be that way.
Yeah. I would imagine there's probably a lot of diversity in the NYPD, right? Like, what do you happen to know? Like, what kind of percentage of NYPD is persons of color?
So actually, now it was just recent. Over 50% now are minority. They've come a long way. So for people to make it seem like something else, it's not people. It's always a nonsense activist or someone with a loud mouth. Over 50% nowadays are made up from diverse communities. That's a pretty good statistic, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's incredible. And New York City, is just, that's probably a pretty accurate representation of the communities as a whole, too, right? Like New York City is a major melting pot of an area. That makes a lot of sense. What do you and your buddies, what do you guys feel right now walking around New York City in a police uniform? What's that like? Hey guys, let me tell you about a great tribesman run business, Rainbow Restoration of Greater Virginia. They exist for one purpose, and that is to be the solution when a problem arises, whether it is a burst pipe or a kitchen fire or a mold infestation or even a large-scale commercial disaster. They are the team that shows up to help you rebuild when things have been broken. They do more than just restore homes and businesses. They restore peace of mind. They have a clear mission to enrich the lives of our community by rebuilding after the unexpected. They're not just contractors. They are a Class A general contractor with the experience and expertise to handle everything from mitigation to reconstruction, and they do it all with integrity, respect, accountability, teamwork, and discipline. And I can tell you from experience, I have personally used them. Rainbow Restoration has helped me with a construction project that I was left high and dry, or actually slightly underwater with, from a previous builder. Rainbow Restoration came in, absolutely took care of everything, fixed everything. So definitely check them out. If you are in need, go to rainbowrestoreva.com. That's rainbowrestoreva.com, or follow them on social media.
So I'm going to be honest, it's very different now than it was just a few short years ago going into 2020, right? It feels like things have definitely gotten better. Normal, I don't know if you want to say normal, but better. But as we just saw once again in Midtown Manhattan, as we see with all these active shooters, there are sick people that will literally go to the ends of the earth to harm individuals. The one thing that I don't like in law enforcement nowadays, or even in our culture, is everyone's buried in their phone. Everyone is texting. Everyone's searching the internet. Everyone's on social media. No one is paying attention to what's going on around them. Whoever's listening to this, when you're in your car, look around. The people walking probably have their head buried in their phone, not even looking the direction they're walking. That involves police officers too. They have to be alert for their surroundings to be able to not only be able to help somebody in need, God forbid someone gets robbed or trips or there's a petty larceny, but to be able to be safe themselves, God forbid someone comes with a firearm or a knife and wants to hurt them. Unfortunately, in this profession, we have to go back from day one and let people know this is a life and death job. You know, you show up every day and there's someone out there that wants to hurt you. Never let your guard down. That does not mean disrespect the public. That doesn't mean you have to be grumpy, but you have to be alert. And that's what law enforcement needs to go back to.
Man, that's good stuff. Joe, as the founder of, Blue Lives Matter, what's one of your biggest obstacles? What is the obstacle that your organization is facing now?
It's being a 501c3. No matter if you're Blue Lives or Tunnel to Towers or Shriners, you're always chasing the dollar, right? Because that's how you operate. You have a mission statement. You have things you want to do to help other individuals, chasing the dollar. And we do get donations, right? We do. We sell things nationwide and we get donations from donors. But to have people that are willing to help us, that are in a financially good situation, that love the cops. Listen, I have Democrats, I have Republicans, I have black, white. People love the cops. They want to help. They don't want the credit for it. And that goes to show they're a good person. But when we're able to receive donations to be able to help that family, I'm going to go back to what does Blue Lives do? Well, one thing that we've done and we've morphed into is we help children and their families that are literally dying from a terminally ill disease. And it all started with a little girl named Abigail Arias. And I have her signature. That is her signature that when the last time I visited her in Houston, Texas, I had it put on me. And it's for children that want to become police officers, and most of them, unfortunately, have terminal cancer, that we fly into New York City and give them an all-expense-paid trip with their families, almost like a Make-A-Wish, where everything's covered, to put aside for a few days the terrible doctor visits and the poking of the needles and the parents crying every day saying, I have one last day with my kid. We give them normalcy, and they get to be sworn in by the greatest police department in the world. They get to meet the mayor of New York City or the cardinal of St. Patrick's Cathedral. They get to meet our mounted horses and go on harbor rides and go to the Freedom Tower. We take them to an Italian restaurant because a lot of these towns are the closest, what is it? The best Italian they have is Olive Garden, and that's not Italian. So, we get to do things, and this is where our money goes, to be able to show the positivity. And that's how we work with communities as well, because a lot of these communities have kids that are Hispanic or Black or, have an illness or a terminal disease. That shows them the human nature of police officers. That shows the good side of things. Yeah. And we've become lifelong friends with these families. A lot of these kids, have passed away, which is the worst thing in the world, especially when, like yourself, we have children and you never want to see that. But that's just one aspect of what we do, and that's where the money goes. And we're 100% transparent. Everything we do, we want people, if they're going to be a donor, to feel like they're a part of this team, to be able to meet the line of duty families, to be able to meet the police officers that serve the communities. But like I said, the biggest challenge is just always, every day, raising the funds, because there's millions and millions and millions of nonprofits out there. Yeah. And you just have to appeal in the right way to certain people. And you just got to keep your head up, keep walking in the right direction, and one foot in front of the other.
Man, that's incredible. I love that idea of bringing kids to New York City, swearing them in, letting them feel what it's like to be a part of NYPD. That is the coolest thing. We in Men's Alliance, we started doing this thing 5 years ago. We've done it 5 Christmases in a row, and we slapped a corny name on it, but we called it helping the heroes. But what we started doing was, for 5 Christmases now, we've collected we've gone for about somewhere between $2,000 to $5,000 a Christmas, and we go buy as many gift cards for grocery stores as we can. And we've taken them to sheriff's departments. One year we blanketed about half a dozen fire stations. The next year we went back to a police department, and then we did it in North Carolina, and then we did it in Pennsylvania, and then last year we were doing it out in Oklahoma. But we've been talking about, as we're getting bigger, as we're growing, it's kind of like we're outgrowing that little project we used to do every Christmas in Men's Alliance, and we're like, hey, it feels kind of like we're trying to invent a wheel here that's not part of the Men's Alliance mission. It's just something we want to do, but there's already organizations that are doing it better. And instead of us doing our little thing, let's just start supporting them. So I want to let you know today that, we're going to start sending our annual funds for that to Blue Lives Matter. So we're gonna officially, partner Men's Alliance with Blue Lives Matter, help you guys out, because you guys are doing it. You're doing amazing things. You're helping the families, of fallen officers, as well as helping these kids with terminal illnesses. So love what you guys are doing. Tell our listeners where to go to learn more and how to support you guys.
So, our social media pages, either Blue Lives Matter NYC or Blue Lives or at Blue Lives NYC, www.bluelivesmatternyc.com. Everything that we have on that site, 100% of the proceeds and the profits go into our chest to be able to help the next officer. We don't just help officers here. We've helped them literally all around the nation. There's the incident, Ronell Singh, a couple of years ago, was shot on December 26th. He had a newborn baby. We flew out to California. We've been to all different locations. And good thing about Blue Lives is we don't just give checks. Anyone can give a check, and that's always good. But we host events where memories are always going to be made. So we have an event coming up on August 10th with the New York Yankees, where we have certain families coming, and they get to once again get out of the house and be able to smile and be around people. We have an event with the New York Mets, where we're going to have With Arms Wide Open. It was founded by police officers, and 2 of their children each have disabilities. They founded a nonprofit where they help other families in law enforcement that deal with the same thing. Their children with Down syndrome or confined to a wheelchair, and they're able to help with medical expenses and medical supplies that they normally wouldn't be able to get. So we get them on the field, and they're going to remember thousands of people seeing them around the stadium and the good that they do. No one's looking. A good person doesn't look for a pat on the back, but it almost regenerates, revives the fire inside of them when they say, wow, we didn't expect this, but we're doing something good. So it's special. We've had families of fallen officers throw out the first pitch at Major League Ballpark. So really, really cool. And getting back to what you said, I'd love to be able to go out to whatever state it is that you're doing something is down the road and help you guys. And whether it's showing up and giving meals to the cops, or whether it's hosting a little fundraiser for a local hometown hero, or this is what I love to do. I really do believe that God puts people in your life for a reason, right? And this organization, once again, if it was not for Blue Lives, I would not be with you here today. I would not know who you are. I would not be speaking to you. We would not be able to team up and do more good in a world that's constantly feeling like it's crumbling, right? At the end of the day, we have to give people hope. And I say it all the time, and I remember it every one of my speeches. I tell them, I remember that image of the big lion and the cub. And you see the big lion looking over, and it says, I thought about giving up, but then I remembered who was watching me, right? You never know who's watching you. We may never know who we inspire, but if we could quietly inspire the people around us to do more good, we're doing what God put us, on this earth for. And that's what we got to continue to do.
Man, you're absolutely right. God brings people into our lives for reasons, and there's no such thing as a coincidence. And Joe, I'm looking forward to partnering with you guys more, and we'll keep talking, you and I, and we'll figure out some fun, creative ways to team up and help make a difference. Last question for you today, pretty important one. Best Italian restaurant in New York City. What is it?
Well, that's hard to say. I'm from Staten Island, the little hometown, Mulberry Street, Manhattan, Little Italy. You come down here and we'll do a taste test, and then we'll go from there, I think. But I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. There's so many great ones. In Staten Island alone, DeLuca's Italian restaurant is one of my favorite. My buddy Rob has 3 restaurants out here. Once again, Mulberry Street, Cafe Napoli. My buddy Lou over there. You got Lamella. There's so many. You got Arthur Avenue in the Bronx. Everyone wants to have a Little Italy, and everyone thinks they're the best. So you come down here, and we'll make the decisions on our own from there.
Man, that sounds awesome. That sounds great. We've got Men's Alliance tribes in New York, but not in New York City yet. So that's coming soon too. So maybe I get up there, help start a tribe in NYC. How cool would that be? And get some good Italian with you. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you. Appreciate what you're doing, your organization, and your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
To find out more about what we are doing in Men's Alliance, go to men'salliancetribe.com. This will help you find a tribe near you. We have grown so much over the past few years. There are thousands of tribesmen all over the country in hundreds of tribes. We're growing every single week. Go to men'salliancetribe.com, find a tribe near you, or maybe you're the man to start one in your area.